So hi everybody and welcome back to the C++ tutorial series for absolute beginners. This is video 127 and in this video we want to talk again about arrays, but this time what happens when we pass an array to a function and why this is confusing a little bit. And to understand this, why this is confusing, let's create a function and an array and see what happens. So let's make also a little bit repetition. So we repeat to create a function, we repeat to create an array, and let's get started. But how we get started, if you don't need a syntax, that's good. If you need a syntax, that's also good. Then use here the pointer syntax. We copy this one. And oops, this is a pointer syntax. I don't need a pointer syntax. I need an array syntax. Okay, we copy this array syntax, pass this here as a comment, and now we create our array. You can create this too to repeat array creation, and on top we make a function with function creation. All right, let's start. So here's the syntax of the array. So, and I create an array. I create, for example, an array for a database, again with scores. And I call it int database user, no, make it ID, user ID, that's very popular and all of time used. And then I write here the square brackets, and then I write here the number of elements which I want in my case 2. And then I make here an assignment operator because I want to initialize it directly. And I initialize it with the curly brackets and I write the numbers in. In this case, this int is the type of the elements. So, which is, let's say just 4 and 5 because I have only 2 elements. Oops. And here I write something else. To make it clear, what is the type of this array, when I ask, then you have to say it's int in brackets 2. So it's very easy to see the type of an array. All time just watch the array numbers and the type in front, and this is the array type. What is the type of the elements here? Then you have to say just int in this case, because this int at the start refers to the elements here also, so you can say just int, and that's the shortcut. If you know this one instantly, then it's very easy. So let's continue. We created an array. Let's create a function which takes an array and changed its first number. So that is our second thing. We have different ways to do this. I make it very simple. I start with a void, which means no return type. I call this one function who changes what it let's call it that no array change first number something. So it makes very clear what I want. Array change first number. Okay, and this is my variable name. And here in parentheses, I write now indeed parameters because I want pass in an array to change it, right? So, and how I write an array as parameter, we never did this, I think, but it's the standard way, like all time, you like the declaration, like the declarator here. And if you do this one, then it's very easy because then you just write int, for example, database user ID, and I write here param to know that this one is a parameter, and here also the 2. And this one is exactly only the type. So you are just writing the array name and the type here. And of course, it indicates also the elements, which has later ints. But this one is just a type, actually. So, with that said, we have now our parameter list. And here is our body, which means our scope. And this is, and then we write here in the scope of this function what we want to do, and what I want to do is change the first number like I wrote it here. What is the first number? This is this 4 here. How we change a number of an array? Very easy. We just call this array. In this case, this one is passed here. I copy this name here. And then I ask which element you want change. This is the first element, but careful. What we learned about arrays, the first element in a slot of an array starts with 0. So this one is the first element in an array. That's a place where what many beginners may get wrong. So careful about that. This is when you call an array, this first element is slot 0, right? And then the second element is 1. So that's why I want to change the first element. I start with an array all the time with 0, which means now I can change it. And to what I change it is an int type, because all the elements are int. So I change it to another int type, for example, 33. And yes, this is so far nice. So we created an array, we created here a function, and now what we do is let's print this out. So how we print out an array? Very simple, std standard library, say out, all right. And then we just call the array and the element which we want print out. In this case, database ID, and now I can specify the elements. For example, I can start from 0, and if I want print out more, I can add them here after, but I'm not going to. What I mean with add is just go so on. Or you can make it even with a for loop and use a for loop later and then print there all the elements out. In my case, I want only print out the first element, because I change here only the first element, and this is the way how to print out the first element. Just call it, and this one will print out our first element. Nice. And I make a new line as well. And don't forget, you can make a new line with this call to end line. This is also a repetition. Some people use that one. I use most time this other version, but this is also fine. So then let's go. And we miss one step, which is, of course, we have to call this function. We never called it here. All right, let's call this function. And array, I'm calling this function, and this function says we should pass in an argument, right? It says when we call this space here an argument. Here is parameter, here is argument. An argument means I must find something which matches this parameter, and this parameter is an array with 2 ints. So type is 2 int array. All right, let's find it. Okay, I have declared it here, so that's easy to find it here. And I pass it in. How I pass it in? Just the array name, right? Database user ID. That's perfect. And with that said, I called it, but I never used it. How I can use it? I can use it, for example, to print out again the first element to see what happens, if it works or not. Std cout database ID, again the first element, and yeah, that's it what I want. And now after that we repeated a little bit arrays, calls and functions. I hope you understand all that what we did so far. The new thing is that we called a function with an array that we had not till now. And let's see, there is one more thing which is very strange, and try to spot this out. Let's start first this one, and let's see if this works. First of all, the program works, that's fine. Then it prints out 4. This is my first value. Yes, it should print out 4. That's fine. And then it prints out 33 because we call this function. The function jumps here on top. The function calls the first, change the first value to 33. And then we are printing out here the first element again, and it prints out 33. So, and I say there is something strange, and I give you a hint. You can pause the video and try to find out. But before I give you a hint, before you do this, here, watch this parameter closely and think about parameters in general. So you can try to find out. I continue and solve it now. And the strange thing here is we passed this, we called this array, this function here, right? And we passed this array. So far, all fine. But the strange thing is here, this parameter is normally a copy. So it is not a reference. What was the difference about a copy and a reference? A copy means when I pass an argument, which is this here, in this function, then this one here is creating, this one means I declare here an array of two ints and copy one. And the strange thing is here, this is not a copy actually. And why not? Because let's watch it closely again. Here I create this array. Here is a declaration with these two numbers. Then I call it the first time. It is 4. That's expected. Yes, that should be. Then I call the function here, so it goes up. And I expect that this array, which I give in, which is my argument, should be copied here. Why copied? Because this one is a new declaration of a toInt array. And this one should be a copy. And then what this copy does is it changes here. This function is going and change now here the first element. But because this one is a copy, I expected it. Wait a minute. You should not change this one here. Okay, you have your own copy here on top. You change only your own one. And I thought, yes, this one here will not be changed. Perfect. But when we watch now this value again, because here I call now this database user ID here, that is this one here. When I click on it, look, it all highlights this one here, which means this 0 here is now changed to 33. I don't want that. That was not expected. And this is a little bit confusing, and that's why we have to understand it. And that's the confusion part. I hope you found it. Perhaps not, because it's very difficult to find for beginners. But if you found it, very good. If you don't find it, no problem. Try to understand at least what I try to explain, that this one is normally a copy, but it behaves not like a copy. So what is this behavior actually? When we think about it, we had a similar behavior like that already. We learned something. And the similar behavior is like a reference. This array here on top behaves like a reference. What is, let's repeat this again. What does a reference do as a parameter? It makes a backwards connection to the caller, which is similar to a pointer, right? A reference behaves similar to a pointer, but the pointer is, let's say, has more power. But the reference behaves like a pointer, which means if you pass an argument like here in it, and it would be a pointer or reference, then it could change the caller here. We learned this. I tried to explain this with references and pointers. And the new thing is this array behaves the same. So that's also our simple solution here. When you see an array is passed to a function, it will behave like a pointer, which means you can change the values of the array, but careful, it will change the caller too, which means I call it here and it will change the caller's values as well, because it behaves like a pointer. All right, that is this confusion part, what happens most time. And the real confusion starts if we try to understand why this happens. And this one we will I will try to explain in the next video, because this is one of the very, very complicated topic. not only for beginners, also for people who never read it, because some skip this part and are confused later. That's why I will talk about this topic here, which is to understand this one, we have to understand this new thing here, which says an array to pointer decay, which means exactly what I said here. This array behaves like a pointer, and they call this one, yes, this here. They say this is something like array to pointer decay. They make here a short explanation, and this short explanation is not, let's say, descriptive enough to understand all the depths behind the scene. And I will do this in the next video. We will go deep in it. Probably hard to understand as a beginner, but if you understand it, then you will be not confused anymore, because this topic, yes, this type of an array, and this address of an array, and this address of a pointer, and pointer behaves like an array, and so on. All this kind of stuff confuses many people. In the next video, I will go here through step by step. It's a complicated one, and if you understand this, perfect. And here is the easy solution: is just when you see an array like here, which is passed to a function, it behaves like a pointer. So you must be careful that this array's caller will be backward changed. That is the easy solution if you understand this one. That's the first step, which you have to understand. And many users use this one as well and say that's enough. But I think I have to go for this explanation, what is here, array to pointer decay. It's complicated, but because we will talk here about types, memory addresses, storage, and conversion, because that's the real thing what happens here. It is an implicit conversion, and that's the irritating part, because this happens all behind the scene and nobody sees really what happens. And yeah, and that's why if you understand this solution, very easy solution, that's good. And in the next video we go for the real little bit complicated solution. But if you understand this one, try to understand it and you will get better in C++, definitely. And here one more thing: if you want, read also, and not if you want, you should read this one definitely, and this in the theory part in a good C++ book or good documentation, so that you can understand this, because, or on YouTube with very good illustrations, because this will become a little bit hard to understand. But I will go tomorrow really step by step and try to show all things, and even I'll try also draw a little bit. I drew it one time, I hope it was not too bad. And here I will draw again, very simplified, of course. Yes, I think I talked too much. So for this video, that's enough. That is the confusion, and we will solve this confusion with the next video, I hope, and to see what happens there and what happens not. If you have any questions or any complaints like all time, write it in the comments. See you in the next, and yeah, good luck and have fun.